Chapter 6. Cade's attention snapped back to the prone form of Emin. He shook him gently, and then harder, but neither elicited any response. Emin? Granda? Still holding him, he looked to Farlan and the family, hoping for help. Farlan rose from kneeling in the dirt and looked wrung out. A long section of cloth wrap was slowly turning red down his side. His hair was a matted mess full of dust, and he was looking extremely pale. He looked at Cade and then the old man, and his face fell. He said something under his breath and locked his eyes on the ground. The family was off to Cade's right, and thankfully they all looked unharmed. They all had a horrified look, though, as they stared at Cade. Miran was the first to speak, and the ferocity of it shocked Cade. The small woman had never so much as raised her voice in Cade's presence.
What did you do to him?
What did I do to him? Cade couldn't even process the question. What? He asked, eyes welling with tears as he looked down at the limp form of his granda. Please, help me. Why won't anyone help me? Sandus started towards him, but his mother cried out and his father quickly ran forward and towed him away. Sandus looked confused, maybe even more than Cade was. As Tommen and Sandus reached Miran, Tommen dropped to a knee and started a quiet conversation with his son. All the while, Miran stood in front of them with arms held wide, as if to protect them. From what? Cade wondered. Me? The woman turned to Farlan. She stood tall and spoke with a commanding tone, but in it there was an unmistakably fearful quiver. Unfart? What are you doing? Farlan raised his eyes from the dirt and looked at the woman. There was a deep sadness in his eyes, but not an ounce of surprise. He expected her to call on him. What are you waiting for? You know what needs to be done, Speaker. This is your job. He is Arndesim. You must kill him, Speaker. Cade's mind reeled. Arndesim? It just couldn't be possible. He wasn't. They were monsters. He stared down at his granda and put his head to his granddad's chest. Nothing. Anguish and pain roiled up inside him, and he let out a tortured, contorted wail. The sound poured out of him, over and over again. Please, just stand up. Wake up. Please. Open your eyes. Emin, of course, didn't move. Farlan walked to the family, turning his back to Cade. He clearly had none of the fear that Miran had. Ma'am, he helped save you and yours this day.
What?
Tommen almost spat out the words as he rose from Sandus.
It's those that filled this world with the fear to begin with. You would make excuses for his kind? He has to die, you know the law.
It didn't make any sense. He had known these people for years. They'd given him dinner and kept space for him on their rug during festivals. It was like they were talking about somebody else. Cade softly lay his granddad's head on the earth and closed his eyes. The twisting emotions slammed about in his chest and threatened to take over once again. He stood, looked to the group, looked to his friend. Sandus? He said. The young boy met Cade's eyes with his own, full of pain, overflowing with it. But he didn't rise, didn't move at all, just dropped his eyes back to the ground and started to weep. Whatever his father had said to him, he now understood what Cade didn't. They were no longer friends now. It simply wasn't possible. Cade dropped to his knees by the body of his grandar, as the tortured sounds tore their way out of him once more. Farlan looked on with a grieved expression, then seemed to set his jaw and turned to address the family. Collect what things from the wagon you can carry easily. I don't expect Dal to return, but night is close to fall, and I mean to be inside Ves Araranth's walls within the hour. The family frowned and looked like Tommen was about to speak, but Farlan continued. Tear up whatever heavy cloth you have and find us a handful of arm-length sticks. I imagine you have some cured fat for cooking. Coat the cloth in that. We'll need the light to see by. Tommen's mouth worked as his eyes darted from the Arnvart and back to Cade.
What of the boy?
He couldn't even say his name anymore. "You will have to travel with us to Araranth," Farlan replied, looking resigned. Both Tommen and Mirren started speaking at once, while shooting furtive glances at Cade. Farlan stalled the twin tirades with an upheld hand. "Undecim or not, even I don't have the right to kill another without the approval of an Unwrapped. An Unwrapped must see him and issue a writ of condemnation. Then anyone may take his life freely, so he will come with us and we will find a reed in the city." The explanation did nothing to allay the concerns of Tommen and Mirren, who, if anything, looked more afraid than they had a moment earlier.
"That's not possible. We won't travel with one of them. We'll vouch for you. We saw what he did."
They had gotten closer to the man and seemed almost to be pleading. A dim recess of Cade's mind managed to register that he didn't blame them. What would he do if he saw an Undecim? An Undecim that had just killed a man before your eyes? He realized that they were right. A bleak sense of hatred crawled into his mind. A black hatred, pointed squarely at himself. "Isn't how it works," Farlan was saying. "If it were, anyone could kill on a whim, provided a witness gave testimony. I need a writ of condemnation before I can do anything. If you refuse to travel with him, then we leave him here. We travel to Araranth, get you and yours there safely. Then tomorrow, me and my Unwrapped will return for the boy."
Oh, okay, that's it. A short chapter, that one.
Yeah, so this one will probably be combined with the next chapter on the final revision, but I will rant about it now. All right, let's have a look.
So after staring at this paragraph for a good 5 minutes, I don't really have much to say about this one, probably because it's so short. One of the bits that I'm not super thrilled about is there's a bit where like Farlan instructs them to grab some cured fat for like cooking oil and some cloth and some sticks for torches to get them to Fes Araranth. But the whole idea that they're leaving as quickly as they are is so that they can get there before nightfall. So they probably don't need the torches, and that's just, seems silly. I'd like to put a little bit more work into when Cade meets this family to make them appear a little bit more familiar, just so that this, like, I like that sort of the dad explains to his son why he can't be friends with Cade anymore, or like why, he's not allowed to go to him. And I like that Tommen doesn't really get it at first, and his dad has to explain it. And I like that Tommen then doesn't fight that. Like after it's explained, he gets it, and and I think that's got a cool sort of, like, the fact that he doesn't, the fact that going from friends to like, oh, it is actually just, it's that important of a problem that there's no fighting this. He's just not my friend anymore. It's done. Sort of gives a bit of credibility, I suppose, to the idea of Undecim being as depraved as they are. And I like the explanation behind. I like to think that in this moment, Farlan isn't decided on whether or not he's helping Cade or not. I like to think in this moment, he actually, now that I think about it, this is something that's going to need to be very carefully written, because with Farlan being like talking about a writ of condemnation, that either needs to be true or not. And if it's, sorry, this is hard to wrap my head around, so you're going to have to bear with me. If it's true that a writ of condemnation is needed, there was like a thread of sense just was, occurred to me, but I don't know if it's, so if it's not true, because it's because there's a bit later where he meets, so he leaves and then he comes back. And basically, I don't think the way the world works, it should make sense that a writ of condemnation would be needed. I think that is the sort of thing that only makes sense if Farlan's making it up so that he doesn't have to kill Cade on the spot. Like he's just lying to the family, which I don't think is as interesting as it could be. Although another way to have it play out could be that a writ of condemnation to kill someone who is presumed to be Undecim, maybe it's not needed, but Farlan never intended to. He doesn't want to kill Cade, even though he never intends to help him either. So maybe he just made that up so that he didn't have to do something horrible right in this moment, and he planned to get the people to town, and then that was going to be the end of it. But then he comes back out, and when he's in front of Cade, he decides, what, fuck it, I'm not killing a kid, and I'll help him. So this bit is, this is also, at this point in the book, the town that they're going to is still referred to as Nearset, but I changed that when reading it to Fes Arath, which is, I think it sort of makes more sense to immediately get to a fortress city. I don't see any reason to drag the book out by they live on a small property out of the way, and then, they've got a tiny town nearby, and then they go to a slightly bigger city nearby, and then they go to a fortress city. People have seen mid-sized, cities in fantasy books ad nauseum, so might as well just get something interesting, i.e. a giant fortress city with, interesting walls and contraptions, and I'm really excited about the bit where they make it to Fes Arath. Yeah. The little, I don't know, it's probably just shit that everyone else has heard before, but I don't know, it seems unique to me, so I'm happy about how it went, but I guess we'll see if it's any good or not. Anyway, hope you liked the video. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Just realized I did have one more thing I wanted to say. As I was editing, I realized that something I'd been trying to work on, which was getting into Cade's head a little bit more, but not necessarily have him vocalize his thoughts like, what am I supposed to do, Cade thought. Not just that, but also like something that's very common in the type of writing that I read a lot, which is like third person perspective limited, which is like, what the character that you're currently following knows, but it's as if an omnipotent God is telling the story, but the omnipotent God only, it can shift perspectives, but it only knows the things that the current person knows. So, for example, in 5 chapters later, it might be Farlan speaking, and, the omnipotent God who's dictating the book may say, Farlan was confused about this. So the person describing the story, the narrative, it's written from the perspective of someone who is capable of knowing what Farlan thinks and what Cade thinks. But when you read a chapter, you only know what is in the person's perspective that you are currently reading from at any given time. For example, this chapter is written from Cade's perspective, more or less. He's the person whose shoes you are in, and he doesn't know what Farlan is thinking about this situation because, it's limited to only his perspective. Anyway, that's just a long way of saying I want to include many more things like, where was it? So there was a bit where it says, it didn't make any sense. He had known these people for years. They had given him dinner and kept space for him on their rug during festivals, which is very poorly written, I guess. But the way, the idea of it, it didn't make any sense. He'd known these people for years. That's the type of descriptive writing that gets into his shoes that I want to include more of. And I've noticed that I did it a little bit in this, and that's really good because that's something I was definitely working on. Well, not consciously, probably in this chapter, but in the later chapters, I'm trying to do more of that. Having it be, it's still third person, it's still just descriptive stuff about, the nature of him and how he relates to the world, but it puts you a little bit more in his shoes. It tells you that he is confused, but it's not so beating you over the head with it as to have him say, I don't understand this, Cade thought. That would be too jarring, but this is exactly the right amount of sort of in his shoes, but still abstracted enough or pulled back enough that it's more it's easier to pass as a reader, I think. So yeah, really, when I listened back to it and I heard that, I was really happy with that because that's something I want to. I don't know how well I managed to incorporate this going forward, but yeah, really, really, really want to get better at that particular thing. Yeah. Anyway, cheers. I'm off. Bye.